Welcome to a Wealth Learning TV, brought to you by the Wealth Movement. I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the founder of Wealth Movement and the main contributor to this broadcast, this YouTube channel. And today what we're going to do is take a look at the 7 previous videos. So it's sort of like a summary video of the series that I've been sharing with you, because what I want to do is bring to life the educating approaches for your use. And these are the ones that I've been sharing with you. There are 12 of them. I'm going to go through them. And then I'm going to touch on the extraordinary experiences 7 considerations, of which I've spoken about a few. And I realized as I was going through some of the videos, I didn't actually go over all 7. So I'm going to just update us from that perspective. And the other thing is to give you a sense of where we're going with Wealth Learning TV, the broadcasts that are going to start to unfold. What's the topics that we're going to be taking a look at? It's almost been like I've been spending the last number of months just working through drawing, writing, thinking, walking, and trying to figure out where do I want to go with this broadcast. And I think I've landed on something. It feels great. And I want to share the opening insights on where that will take us on this Wealth Learning TV channel here on YouTube. So with that, let's get started. And again, I'll just remind you, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'd so appreciate it. And I look forward to your comments as well. So when it comes to the topic of education, educator, educating, these are really important terms in my life. When I came to understand that probably in many of my lives in the past, and certainly as I was walking the path currently, is that this theme of educator, educating, education has been there with me. And I actually went so far as to actually study it at a doctoral level. And I went through adult education, and then I educated in the area of human performance improvement, which was an advanced way of looking at adult learning, adult education, looking at it through neurodiversity, looking at it through a number of different kinds of lenses. And what came to me was this deep appreciation of education, which sort of originates from Educare, which is to take care of one another, to help one another learn. And it is what expanded into the whole field of education for children, for adults. And that's what I wanted to just remind you of. So in a sense, education is this a perspective we have about a body of concepts and practices that we put under the banner of education, Educare, which is to help each of us learn about those things that we need to learn about, and to be able to share those with others that bring meaning to our life, to be able to live an extraordinary life, to co-create well-living workplaces, to eco-create a wealthy world, whatever terms that you would like to connect with those. And it might be so far as much or far as just being able to become very skilled at something that is of contribution for the world. And each one of us that's listening has our own view of what that education, those concepts and practices are for yourself in terms of being with others. The other thing that I would mention is that from an educator point of view, the educator has a point of view. There is the perspective of the whole, and then you as the educator has a point of view, and that's linked up with the educating approaches that you use. And there are 12 that I'm going to share with you. Are there more? One could certainly say that. These 12 are the ones that I have written about. I'm actually updating an earlier book where I spoke about 9 of them. I've retitled one and added a couple of more because I think there is an unfolding of the importance of education, educator, and educating. And I'd like to be on the forefront of that and to be able to share that. And if for no other reason, it comes from my head, heart, and hands, and to share it with you, the listener. So with that, as I mentioned, there's been 7 previous videos. This is the 8th in the series that spoke about these 12 educating approaches. And they are listed below. The video links are listed below. So in the show more notes, so you can go and look at them and watch them. They average somewhere around 40 minutes, some are a little longer. And you will find insights about the different educating approaches. Some of them were done in pairs. One video has 4 of them covered, and 3 videos have each bringing out the story associated with that educating approach. So the first ones that I wanted to share with you are under 2 categorizations. There are actually 3, but I'll speak about the first 2. The first one is called Teach in the Reach, and the second one is Guide on the Ride. So the Teach in the Reach covers off facilitation, instruction, training, and consulting. So we would associate facilitate, instruct, train, and consult. And these ones link into what I call to manage systems for persons. In other words, you would use these to be able to take a look at working with groups of people and being able to provide the systems that go with it. So the notion of facilitate, to draw ideas from groups of people. Can you do it of a person? Yes. But usually associated with persons. The notion of being able to instruct, to explain the why of what you're learning. The train, which is to get you up to speed with that skill that's necessary at this point in time. And then consult is to bring some level of expertise to a topic because of what it is that you have done in the past. So that is the Teach in the Reach. The Guide on the Ride brings forward the notion of mentoring, coaching, shifting, and counseling. So the idea would be mentor, coach, shifter, and counselor. Now, these ones tend, I think, lean into the world of being able to lead a person from safer practices, from the systems. In other words, your involvement personally in the systems. And they certainly do it from a safer practices perspective. So to mentor is to enter in so that the mentee can ask you questions of your lived experience. The coach is there is to ask you to fulfill your accountability and to be able to provide support as you fulfill your accountabilities and get done what needs to get done. The shifter is someone who's there is that there's some shift, maybe there's a pivot or a course creation, and I want to shift my way of looking at it, ways of doing it. So a shifter is there. The counselor is there where sometimes there's some confusion, there might be mental health aspects, and you just need someone to chat with, to work it through that deeper feelings aspect so that you can understand what's going on. And that's why it's a guide on the ride. So Teach in the Reach, Guide on the Ride. And those were brought forward in 3 videos. The first video was about the facilitative mentor, bringing those 2 together, then the instructive coach, and then going over the other 4. So those links again are down below so that you can explore what each one is about. And I cover off quite a bit, gives different angles of looking at it. So I certainly encourage you to explore each one. But as I make the announcement about what's coming up in the future, I think you'll appreciate that it will go even deeper and richer, and you'll be able to enjoy these notions of teach and the reach and the guide on the ride. So I mentioned that there's 12, so I've covered off 8. So the other 4 are underneath the banner of Sage Off the Page. And I'm just having a little bit of fun here because these are the ones where, as you evolve your own life in terms of your involvement in life and the things that you learn along the way, as you evolve who you are in being fully human, being natural, being planetary, being Solaris in terms of this being and having of doing, which we call living life. These other 4 are sort of ways in which to bring those notions of teach in the reach and guide on the ride together and really start to hone this perspective of education, these educating approaches, this notion of the point of view that you are interacting with others through. Because there is a great belief, certainly on my part, is this notion of when you listen, you learn, where you share, you educate. So when you listen, you learn is to really understand who is influencing you. Where you share, you educate is to be alert to you educate who. And when you have this dynamic, then you start to understand the sort of dance. I call it the wiggly tea dance that starts to unfold right in front of you around learning and educating. And this dance I have found to be fascinating. It has taken me around the world. I've had the pleasure of sharing insights about this and learning so much from other people in terms of what they've got to say about educating and learning. But just back to this this notion of sage off the page, the words that I use to share with you the educating approach are Celebrant, Weaver, Navigator, and Wholversant. Okay, some of these you're going, I think I've heard about them, but what about some of these others? Well, the Celebrant is one in which you engage with other people from a place of the celebration of what is happening as you hit life touchstones or markers and being able to celebrate. We think of, there are those who do weddings, all right, celebrants. There are those who are transitioning into other aspects of their life. There are times when you might hit a certain age and you want to celebrate it. These are the notions of celebrant. The other one is weaver. Now, weaver is when you really start to interact with the different kinds of communities that are available to you. There is the understanding of the base community, which is, what's the level of commonness that unifies a group of people, all the way through to like a community of significare, as I call it. What is the significant caring in this grouping, in this community of persons? And how would you weave that connection, the notion of sometimes there's competition, sometimes there's collaboration. How do you weave all of that together? That's the weaver. The navigator is the person who is not only finding the way themselves, but finding the ways that others can take up. And so the navigator in many ways is bringing all of these other educating approaches together and being able to share them in ways that a person can, oh, I can navigate along this pathway, or I can navigate along this hallway, or maybe I'll navigate along this runway or highway or roadway, whatever it might be. It's sort of learning how to move in such a way is that not only you benefit for yourself, but you're benefiting with others, this way of bringing it together and understanding when each of the educating approaches are best suited for the situation and the learning that is taking place. So that's the notion of Navigator. And those are in the 3 videos that are listed below, and you can go through them. But as I was getting ready to do the summary, I realized I didn't do a video on Wholversant. Now, this is kind of a new term, possibly for a lot of you, but it comes from the idea is that there is a term called the universe. And while I like the term, I'm not always sold on it. What I do like is the term wholeverse, is thinking about it from a whole perspective rather than this notion of coming at it into one perspective. Now, that's a personal choice on my part, and I bring it forward is because from a galaxy point of view, I understand we are in a galaxy. The Earth is in a galaxy, and then there are other galaxies, and I have no clue what those other galaxies. So if I was to think about this universe that I'm in, but there is more of a wholeverse, and therefore I adopted the term wholeverse to just remind me that there's even more that I can tap into as time goes by. And each day we learn more about the wholeverse. The other part to this is the Wholversant is someone who, like a celebrant, like a weaver, like a navigator, has an appreciation for the whole. And what does that understanding, those insights, that investigations, those interpretations, those ideas, when brought to others, what can it do for that person? How might that person get clarity and confidence in it, and to be able to use those insights in ways to influence the time, effort, and money that a person puts into living life and to being with others. And so the Wholversant was the title I gave to that educator who is involved in that educating approach. I started off with Holeric, and I thought, oh, wow, that's kind of neat in terms of this notion of the whole, and the cleric, someone being someone who's writing about the story. And then I found that it's actually a term that's used in one of the online games, the Holeric, and I thought, oh, maybe not. So I went and came up with Wholversant. And I thought that that would be a fun way in which to speak about this person looking at the whole. Now, I would offer to you is that there is this notion of the metaphysics of Wholversant, but there's also the quantum physics of the Wholversant. When you start getting down into the electrons and all of the quantum physics area, I find that kind of fascinating. I don't spend a lot of time there. The notion of more of the whole, the metaphysics I play with. I mentioned is that I did that doctorate on adult learning, and that led me into human performance. I would mention is that that doctorate was, I wrote about a 10-dimensional framework that is based on metaphysics, physics, and quantum physics. And what I was attempting to do was to find a way to explain this approach to living life that I was unfolding for me, and it links to these educating approaches. And I actually decided that I'm going to write or produce, I guess is a better word, the original doctoral work. There was a book, and then I wrote the doctorate about the book, how I wrote the book. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an update version of that in terms of, what was it, 25, 26 years later. So I wrote it back in the 90s and the mid 90s, and now we find ourselves here in 2022. I thought it'd be kind of fun to update that book. Now, the other interesting aspect of that book and these educating approaches was that the book that I wrote, this 10-dimensional learning framework, I was waiting for something we call virtual reality. There's other words that are now starting to pop up. I would use another phrasing, cognitive articulation, which is to provide a way to articulate the cognition that we have in ways that you can see it from different perspectives, which is why the virtual reality would become so important. I was always enamored with the holodeck on the Starship Enterprise. And I thought, wow, if I could get into something like that, then this 10-dimensional learning framework would be of great value. But where I landed it was I brought these educating approaches, these concepts together so that I could actually draw it on a two-dimensional piece of paper. Einstein called it the Flatlander view. And I went, oh, can I actually draw it in such a way? And I actually was able to bring to life what I call the 9+1 framework, these 10 dimensions on a piece of paper, and use it to think through this notion of, you could think of like 3D chess. So you may have seen 3D chess images and that, and how do you bring it together? And that's what I started to play with. And that's where I got in terms of these notion of the 12 educating approaches. And I started to share them in the video series, and I was certainly leaning them into the world of the adult outdoor education, outdoor pursuits, because that has been very much a central theme in my life as it has been unfolding, as being connected to nature informed, nature infused, outdoor informed, outdoor infused activities. And how was I using these educating approaches along the way? And I did spend time in universities as a professor, instructor, and using these ideas just as an entrepreneur and being a CEO of a company, and how might I use all of these as well. But now that I find myself unfolding a life here at 68 point, well, it's almost 68.5 years young now. What do I want to do to be able to bring what I have learned, what I believe is still in me to share, and to explore and discover? And so I've started to rethink, rescript, reimagine, reframe what it is that I want to do. And therefore, I will be bringing out a new topics, new ideas in terms of this Wealth Learning TV here on YouTube. But just before I get to close and just hint at a little bit more about what's coming, I just want to remind you that one of the other topics I was covering was extraordinary experiences. And what are the 7 considerations of an extraordinary experience? And if you're going to weave these together and celebrate them and navigate through them, then you have this more whole-versical way of looking at the idea of the delivery of extraordinary experiences based on services and products. Now, these extraordinary experiences that I'm talking about is that we can have this sense of good, great, and then there's this idea of memorable, remarkable, extraordinary. And I found the 5 just simply because it's a great way to sort of speak about this escalation. How might you use these educating approaches as you bring to life these extraordinary experiences with persons and for yourself? So the idea of the 7 considerations was to bring to the foreground is that there is a prompt, all right, a trigger that takes place. So something triggers you, it prompts a feeling, all right, that then gets you to a point of reflection. And if this trigger prompt, it doesn't have the reflection in a sense, you might get a sense of what is called the amygdala hijacking, which is you react rather than respond. And what I'm attempting to do with the considerations is to remind you that these are elements of an experience, the extraordinary experience that you want to be minding as you're creating them, so that you understand what might be a trigger prompt in them, and therefore take into consideration you reflecting in the educating approach, the practices that you would use to be able to, in a sense, to dream, design, develop, deliver, determine extraordinary experiences with the audience that you're interacting with. And that is wide. It isn't just about the outdoor recreation, outdoor pursuits. It could be in anything that you are involved with. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So the 7 notions of triggers, emotional prompts that require you to think about how you're going to weave these into the extraordinary experience, your reflection. Let me just go through them with you. It'll be more of an overview. These are actually going to come out more and more in the next series of videos, the work that I'm going to be sharing with the world. Actually, let me reframe that: for the world, with the planet, and from the whole. So of the 7, they are consequential, transferable, dramatic, workable, safer, and novel. Let me just talk about each one. Consequential. The extraordinary experience is that there is a relatable, far-reaching, significant consequence about getting involved in the experience. And I think about it from a voice, authority, mastery, position point of view, is that there is a consequence. If you're getting involved in the experience and the creation of this extraordinary experience, then there is a consequence that's associated with that. And the more that consequence unfolds, and the more you can bring it out, it can have certainly this ripple effect that influences others that are touched because of the consequence of the experience that the learner went through, and yourself. The notion of transferable is that by going through it, and the idea is that there's interchangeability, there's an assignment, you can negotiate the use of it somewhere else. Let me give you an example here, is that for many years I ran a business where I did a lot of team development, group development, and there were activities that we used, and it was to find ways to brief and debrief a person by going through this activity. It could be like whitewater rafting. How was that transferable into the workplace? And we would make those connections, weave those fibers and threads and strings and cords to ropes that someone could use. And it was to help a person inform the decisions that was unfolding for them, and giving them other ways in which to look at what was happening in the workplace. The next thing that the third one was dramatic, is that there had to be some sense of wow, something noticeable, sensational about what took place. I mentioned the whitewater rafting. What was sensational about it was that the groups that I was interacting with, they actually paddled, steered, navigated the raft down the river, and I was there more what I call the safety officer to make sure that no one got hurt. So it was sensational. Instead of them just being sort of the passive paddlers, they actually had to learn how to navigate the river with the raft and people working together. So that made it more dramatic for them. And from that, we were able to figure out, yes, we could actually do things, and I can move past what I thought was, well, I'm not sure I can do that, to, hey, guess what? I gave it a go. I may not have been the strongest of the paddlers in steering the raft, but I got to do it. I got a sense of what it was like, and how might I bring that dramatic aspect transferred into the workplace because of the consequences associated with it. I think you can see the layering that's happening here. The next one was, is it workable? Because in the extraordinary experience, and you're bringing it forward, there still has to be a practical, feasible, realistic aspect to it. In other words, you can transfer that dramatic aspect, that notion of a consequence, back to the workplace. Because if you didn't, then there would a feeling of, yeah, it was a great activity, it was fun, yeah, it was wonderful, okay, but it was a day out, but I'm not sure how I'm going to actually work with that as they move forward. One of the anchor points that I did, and it leans into the next one a little bit, which is the metaphoric, is sometimes, rafting, workplace, one's a metaphor. How do you bring it over so that there's a representation that's symbolic, and how do you bring it across? And that was done through the briefing and the debriefing, this notion of workable metaphor. The way that I connected it was that we always had a collection of broken paddles. So what we would do is that as follow-up to the day's activities, we would go in and just do a little follow-up with the group or team or teams that were interacting. It could be a department. And what we did was we brought one of the broken paddles, and we put a plaque on it and celebrating the fact that they had gone through what that day was about. And we actually created a ceremony. Remember, Celebrant, celebration, all right? And to weave the community together, we did a celebration, and then we asked a couple of people just to speak about what was it that was really important from that day, so that we could figure out, well, how do we use the metaphor? How do we work at that it comes back from a dramatic point of view that gets us into this world of transferable and the consequence? And we sort of had an opportunity to revisit it. And that's this notion of these characteristics from an extraordinary experience point of view. The next one was the idea of safer. Now, this is really important and near and dear to my heart, is that I instructed wilderness remote first aid for 25 years. I was actually an instructor trainer of instructor trainers. So I actually edited, wrote one of the wilderness remote first aid books. And it was always an underpinning in this notion of manage the safe systems for persons and lead persons from safer practices, and this notion of the value of safety. So it was always woven into these extraordinary experiences, so that the systems that we were working with, the step-by-steps that were taking place, there was always this notion of it was a safe system as it unfolded. And the practices that we went through is that the person understood that you could only push it so far before you had to go, hang on a minute, this is not what I want to do. One of the great examples of it, about 99% of the activities that I created, all right, was being very mindful is that if your feet leave the ground, what would happen? All right. So if you're moving from the ground into the raft, or you're moving from the ground to being picked up and put through what's called a spider web activity, versus your feet leaving the ground and climbing up a rock hill, what was different? What would be taking place? What would be the safe systems and the safer practices that were necessary? So safety was woven into everything that I did. And the great aspect of the safer storyline, when someone shared this with me not too long ago, he says, because of human development, in other words, going through these extraordinary experiences, is human development, a net benefit is safety. I had to think about that, and I went, well, yeah, the safer systems, safer practices, but because of the development of the person and being fully human, being natural, being planetary, being Solaris, this human development, the thinking and the feeling that went with that, there was a safety aspect, a value of safety that was woven in, celebrated, used to navigate what was taking place. And I've always appreciated it now that a person said it to me, as that's what I was doing. I wouldn't have said it that way until he did. And he was coming from a place of looking at high risk outdoor adventures and what the notion of safety, how does it apply when a group is going into this notion of high adventure. I'm thinking cross-country skiing across avalanche areas, or doing a lot of a little more technical rock climbing and things like that. But the not the but, I think it's an and. And the last one is it novel and original, fresh, imaginative. So as I moved along in my extraordinary experiences, sort of what I had in my backpack that I carried with me, I was always refreshing the ideas, finding some newer ways in which to do it. So if someone had done it before in some way, they would go, oh, this is a variation. This is kind of fun. It's another way in which to do it. Or if someone had done something with me before and they wanted to bring it into their team, how might I make it a little bit novel and find another way in which to bring it forward. But sometimes that being novel, and I learned my lessons, is that sometimes the activity I thought, this is really great, but it actually ended up more like a burp in the day. And I sort of had to save myself from there's a burp that took place because I actually took a gopher hole or down a rabbit trail, and it wasn't workable. I just got too novel, and it backfired. So back to the drawing board and some reconfiguring, and there are ways in which I pulled things out of my sleeve that really helped. To pull it out of my backpack, figuratively. The notion of that preparation approach, the prevention backpack, the continued practice or practice continues, as I refer to it. I could always pull these items out and work with the creation of these extraordinary experiences. So I wanted to bring those to your attention again, is because as you interact with others, wherever it might be, whatever the workplace might be, how might you create these extraordinary experiences? And maybe you have to work through good to great to the notion of memorable, remarkable to extraordinary. You may not necessarily want to just jump into extraordinary, but how might these 7 considerations help inform you? And in the show more notes, there's a little bit more ideas that go with it, so that you have something to sort of stand on, like a platform to create these extraordinary experiences. So I just ask you, can you weave ways into it using even these educating approaches, learning about the 12 of them, applying it to extraordinary experiences, and just adding that little bit more to what I lovingly call simply serious fun, simply serious play, because play is a form of learning. Learning is brought about with educating, and I think that you can see this notion of the fibers to threads to strings to chords to ropes that I've been sharing with you. And from that sort of metaphor as well, I just wanted to bring to your attention what's going to be unfolding over the weeks and months to come from this notion of Wealth Learning TV here on YouTube as an extension of the wealth movement. And where I'm going with this is that I'm going to go into the world of environmental entrepreneurship. Sometimes people call it ecopreneurship. I prefer environpreneurship, all right, which tends to come out as environmental entrepreneurship. And I say that is because there's a continuum, a little continuum that you can work with in terms of ethical, ecological, environmental. And that, I'd like to bring that to your attention and see if it's of value in terms of the work you do. So the environmental entrepreneurship, yes, it has this sense of what can we do to be able to be for the world, with the planet, from the whole. But some of this also can be how might you use some environmental entrepreneurship inside of organizations to make the workplace, a place of work, a better place, a place where people live and work well together. How might you use some of those insights in terms of how you live yourself, right? And this notion of being and being fully human, being natural, being planetary, being Solaris, just as it is about this notion of understanding the whole and bringing those ideas, this notion of eco-creating, environmentally creating the whole, this notion of a wealthy world. And working at it from a whole. And I want to explore that and bring that forward and invite you into the community. And we can weave this together. We can celebrate this together. We can navigate this together, because there is this notion of the environmental entrepreneurship is this idea of a perspective. And then there's the notion of the entrepreneuring that goes with that, the idea of the approaches of entrepreneuring that you can use. The entrepreneur themselves and what's their point of view as they move forward. And this use of education to be able to support the entrepreneur, entrepreneuring with this entrepreneurship. And I'd like to go so far as to be able to help people understand the use of education, not only inside of the organization that they're creating, but also their interactions with their audiences and how might they be able to use that. To be able to help those who are into this environmental entrepreneurship to find mentors and facilitators that can support them. One of the areas that I'm an aficionado. Wow, I can't remember how to say that word. But anyway, I love to be a facilitative mentor, and I might be able to provide those services for organizations to help them get there. And I think there will be certainly a leaning into helping those who are just getting started, but there are the notion of those who are sustaining or scaling. I will take a look at where I might be able to help out. But also I have insights and access to understanding investing and funding of the notion of starting or sustaining or scaling. And how do I help someone to move from being entrepreneurial, which is thinking about things and playing with it, dabbling in it, to actually becoming an entrepreneur. And sometimes that is a connection between entrepreneurial, which is looking for funding, and entrepreneur, which is using investing. And I'd like to bring that forward because I've been doing quite a bit of that work over the years. Unfortunately, there's a bit of conflict that's taking place, or a lessening access to the notion of what is the funding that is available, what is the investing. But I think that that is turning a corner, and I think that some of the ways that I'd like to bring what I have learned over time, I can bring forward and help those of you who are into the world of environmental entrepreneurship, is find ways in which to help you. And that's what we're going to be bringing forward, the story connections with those, the actual practices and concepts necessary to move that forward. And in there, I'm going to be bringing a bit of the arts. I will be sharing some of my poetry, some of the children's stories. I'm actually going to start writing fantasy parables that bring to the foreground some of these ideas that I've been talking about. Remember that 10-dimensional learning framework? I've got something framed up in my mind that I'd like to bring forward. And how might I interact with you to be able to bring those ideas and investigations and interpretations and insights that you have, and to bring those for the world with the planet from the whole? Love to explore that with you as well. So lots of things are going to be happening here at Wealth Learning TV, here on YouTube. This will be our primary platform that we'll be bringing it forward. And you might find even some more shorts. I've been playing with the shorts aspect, something of a video that's less than a minute. I got a little bit of work to do there, but that's okay. I'm just going to explore it. But I've got something set up for me for the next number of years, a way in which to be me for the world with the planet from the whole. And I'll be unfolding and infolding those stories as we move forward. So with that, again, subscribe to the channel, and if you have any comments about what's going on, then please share away. You can find us at wealthlearning.com as well. Very simple front facing website, and then some support in behind that. So with that, I'm going to acknowledge it's a take care time, and we're going to close this off. I'm going to wish you the best for what it is that you do. And may your enjoyment, your simply serious play actually come out in the day ahead. Take care.